Ajja imancha divasang uposatang uposami. Ajja imancha divasang uposatang uposami. Ajja imancha divasang uposatang uposami. So this is very important to remember, that we are focusing on the body and the mind, whatever is going on in the body at this moment, you are watching that, and whatever is going on in the mind, you are watching that. Introspection. You are not thinking of what is going on outside, or even memories of what was going on in the past, or thinking of the future. We are only thinking about the present, and that is also not what is happening outside, but what is happening inside. So if you constantly watch what is going on inside you, that itself will purify the mind. That is the important thing to practice and benefit from that. Okay. Watch the breath as it comes in and as it goes out. Observe how the body feels as the breath comes in, how the body feels as the breath goes out. You have any questions to ask? No questions, huh? You have? Yeah?
Bhante, I have a bit confusion.
What's that?
I have a bit confusion on the relation and contradiction between the existentialism and Buddhism.
Existentialism and Buddhism.
Yeah, Bhante. If you could elaborate that a bit more.
You want to know the difference?
Difference and contradiction and the relation.
Well, existentialism, they are bringing up the subject because they are speaking about the existential problem. The existential problem is that out of all animals, it is the human being that is aware of his own existence. And the human being is also aware that he is going to die. And death becomes a problem. That is what is called the problem of mortality. Mortality means death. No one likes to grow old, fall sick, and die. That is the problem. So it is that problem that the Buddha saw. Before he became a Buddha, he left the luxurious life as a prince to go into the forest to find a solution to this problem. So that way, the existentialists are talking about the problem of insecurity of life. But when the Buddha solved the problem, how did he solve the problem? He solved the problem by understanding that the existentialists are making a mistake. That is, that they think that they are existing. That is the biggest mistake. Not only the existentialists, all human beings are thinking that they exist. That is seen as a delusion, Maha. Maha is the delusion to think that we are existing. So the only way is to awaken from that dream, that we are dreaming that we exist, although we are not really existing. It is only when you have realized that we are not really existing. If we are not existing, can we die? Before you can die, you have to exist. And it is that very important point that the Buddha understood, that we are not really existing, and therefore there is no death, and there is no death, and there is no rebirth if we are not existing. So that is the important thing to understand. The difference between existential thinking and the Buddhist thinking is the experiential thinking. Now this experiential thinking is also similar to the modern, in Western philosophy. There is a word which is called metaphysical thinking. Metaphysical thinking is to question the idea of existence. That the Western philosophers have been questioning, is it true that we are existing? They have questioned that, but they have not fully understood it. So it is this experiential thinking that solves the problem. So that is the important thing to understand. So that is understood only when you begin to understand what is called the Paticca Samuppada. Paticca Samuppada is an explanation of the mistake in thinking. That is the meaning of the Paticca Samuppada. But today, all the Buddhists who talk about Paticca Samuppada, they have not understood the Paticca Samuppada in the right way. They talk about Paticca Samuppada as trying to stop rebirth. They think the solution is to stop rebirth. And to stop rebirth means to die and die forever. But there is no death if there is no existence. You understand? That is the thing to understand. So, okay, so that question is answered. Huh?
Next question. Bhante, another question is, the last 20th century Richard Dawkins.
Huh?
The last 20th century Richard Dawkins in his book Selfish Gene claimed that behind each and every kind of love or affection, there are selfishness, gene selfishness, which is the main properties of gene, works. And we, in your book, we say that selflessness, how will it be possible to respond his theory?
I didn't understand what you're trying to say.
Richard Dawkins,
Huh?
Richard Dawkins wrote a book on biology, Selfish Gene. The name of the book, Selfish Gene. And in
You are
his
talking about selfishness.
selfish gene, selfish gene, genes.
What is he saying? Huh? What is he saying?
This is a book, Selfish Gene, written by Richard Dawkins.
Oh, Selfish Gene, written by Richard Dawkins. Oh, I see.
Yeah.
Now, what is the problem?
Bhante, his question is that they claim that behind affection and love there
Yeah.
is selfishness. But you
yeah.
you are explaining that it is possible to love in a selfless manner. That's your question.
Is that what you're talking about?
Yeah.
And the selfishness is the inherent characteristics of genes. He claimed that
Selfishness is?
inheritance characteristics are indispensable and inheritance.
Inherited characteristics of the genes, like what Freud is saying.
Selfishness is inherited characteristic of genes.
Yeah.
That's what he's saying. Well, what we are saying is, the word moha, you have to understand lobha, dosa and moha. Moha is the idea of existence. Existence are two kinds, objective and subjective. Objective existence is that we think that this table exists, this house exists, or various things exist outside. The world exists. Subjective existence is I exist. So you are talking about the existence of the world as well as yourself. That is the idea of existence. And because you are thinking that you exist, I exist, that means that is what begins the selfishness. Selfishness comes from the idea of existence. And so, when the idea of existence disappears, all selfishness disappears. That is the meaning. And when you talk about love, love can be understood as a relationship between yourself and another person. That means you exist, the other person exists, and you are in love. So that means this is based on the idea of existence. You understand? But what we call metta is different from that. Metta is not love in that way. Metta is to think of all beings. May all beings be well, comfortable, peaceful and happy. When you think of all beings, and you begin to think that others are as important as yourself, that turns into karuna. Karuna is when you begin to see no distinction between yourself and others. Like a mother thinking of her children, that children are as important as herself. So, in the same way you think of all beings. May all beings be well, comfortable, peaceful and happy. When all beings are equal to yourself, the self disappears, like a river going and falling into the ocean and loses its identity. The river doesn't exist anymore once it has gone into the ocean. So in the same way, you cease to exist when you are thinking of all beings. And when you begin to disappear in the interest in all beings, all unhappiness disappears. Because all unhappiness is self-centered. And when all unhappiness disappears, you are happy. That happiness is the happiness of selflessness. That is what is called mudita. Mudita is the happiness of selflessness. But that happiness is not an emotion. It is not a disturbance of the mind. It's a peaceful, restful state of the mind. The mind is calm and tranquil. And that calmness and tranquility of mind will not be disturbed by the changing conditions of life. Gain and loss, fame and ill fame, praise and blame, pleasure and pain doesn't disturb that tranquility of mind. And that tranquility of mind leads to what is called apperception. That is upekka. Upekka is where you begin to become aware of the process of perception. what you perceive disappears when you see the process of perception. And the process of perception also is analyzed into 5 parts: Rupa, Vedana, Sanya, Sankhara, Vijnana. When that is understood properly, you begin to understand what is called the Paticca Samuppada. And when you have understood Paticca Samuppada, you have understood that the whole world that you are thinking about, and even yourself, is a delusion. So there is no existence of a subject or an object. The idea of existence itself is what is creating what is called birth, old age, death, and all the sufferings of the world. So when you have understood that, all suffering comes to an end. So this is very different from what this man is talking about in that. Understood, huh? No. Okay.
Can I ask Bhante one question?
Yeah?
This is about the relaxation of the body.
Relaxation of the body.
Yeah, could you explain about as the teaching of the Buddha? Because I was just thinking how I can relate as the teaching of the Buddha.
You're talking about what?
Relaxation of the body.
Yeah.
And try, because Buddha is talking always the control your mind, and all the time is talking about on the mind. So I could not find, and maybe I'm not very clear.
Huh?
I'm not clear what Bhante tried to say by the term relaxation of the body. So as the teaching of the Buddha, I want to know. Thanks.
You see, the problem is that you are separating yourself from the body. You are trying to relax the body. So where is the you? Or you are separating the mind and the body. You can't relax like that. You have to understand that you have only a body. And there is no you to relax the body. You see?
But is it like
Huh?
relaxation is like hallucination?
Relaxing is not doing something. To relax is to stop doing. You see, every time you try to do something, you are tensing yourself. You have to stop doing everything. That is the way you relax. Now, if you hold it like this, you are doing something. But if you let go, you stop doing. You see, that is relaxation.
The whole world tells us to do something, so this is completely opposite. So
Yeah.
that's what we're struggling.
Yeah.
If we say the government, we don't want to do anything, they will get upset.
Yeah. If you try to do meditation, you are not doing meditation. Meditation is not something to do. It is to stop doing. No? Yeah.
Bhante, if I understand, Bhante Ariyoti was saying that
Yeah.
Buddha keep telling us to calm the mind,
Yeah.
and according to him, he does not notice that there is anything in the scripture that talks about how relaxing the body. Is that your question? So, what is the connection?
You have to understand the word passaddi. What is the meaning of the word passaddi? Passambayang, kaya sankaram. What is passambayang? That is relaxing. It is because you don't know the meaning of the Pali word. That's the problem. Passaddi is relaxation.
I think, Bhante, the bigger problem is that many people who translate the word pasadi keep referring it to calming the mind. That it is the mind.
That's the problem.
The same with the word sukha. Again, sukha, they're talking about the mind, not the body experiencing comfort.
Sukha is the comfort in the body. Piti is the happiness in the mind, the feeling of happiness. But sukha is the comfort of the body. So we have to understand the Pali words in the proper way. If we don't understand the Pali words, or if we interpret the Pali word in the different way, then we lose the message given by the Buddha. This is why I am using different words to translate the Pali.
Okay. And Bhante, then when we say Sabbe Satta Sukhita Hontu, Sukhi, Sukhita, Sukhi.
Sukhita.
Yes, Bhante. I mean, is it means then referring to physical comfort?
No, Sukha means comfort. Sukha means comfort.
Yes, Bhante. When we say,
in Bangla, be happy, Sukhito hoti means be comfortable.
Be comfortable. Okay. Okay, thank you.
Sukhi hotu. Sukhi hotu means being comfortable. So that is the meaning. Sukha means comfort.
I think it's commonly said that Sukhi Hotu means may you be well and comfortable.
Bhante, I have a question.
Yeah.
Is experience beyond logic and intelligence?
What's that?
Is experience beyond logic and intelligence? In the world, there are a lot of emphasis on intelligence and logic.
Well, when we talk about intelligence, we are talking about thinking. And logic is simply a method of thinking. What we call logic is a method of thinking. Now there are different people who have spoken about different kinds of logic. These are different methods of thinking, that's all.
So how does experience counter or relate to
experience? Is simply perception and conception. When we see something, that is an experience. When we hear a sound, that is an experience. When we smell a perfume or bad smell or whatever, it's an experience. When we taste something, that is an experience.
Does experience become memory eventually? Does experience become memory eventually?
Yeah, memory is where the experience is remembered. Memory comes from remembering. So, when we think of a thing called memory, we are thinking of something like a library where we pack various books. You see, but there is no real packing like that. But memory is the ability to remember. That is all connected with the past. What we have seen before or heard before, if we can get back to that, that is the memory.
Okay. Yeah.
Some people never learn from experience.
Yeah.
Because they never remember their mistakes, so they keep repeating it.
Yeah.
Bhante, I have another question. In the last 40 years in the world, human rights and feminism has been quite a big sort of topic.
Feminism.
And human rights.
Human rights.
And feminism.
Yes.
How does Buddhism relate to these two thoughts? The Western people have put a lot of effort in it.
Well, the Buddha has been speaking about this all the time. Because there are no rights. Now the moment you talk about rights, you are trying to fight. You see, that's the problem. So we have to stop thinking in terms of rights.
I remember once you mentioned it as the HR should be human responsibility.
Yeah.
Maybe they should change human rights to human responsibility.
Yeah, this is when people begin to fight. There are no things called rights. The important thing is good and bad. There is good actions and bad actions. That is what is called kusala and akusala. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Bhante, I have another question. In Australia, recently there was a vote about same-sex marriage.
What?
In Australia, recently we had a plebiscite, a vote of referendum on same-sex marriage.
Same-sex marriage?
That's correct. And the vote... Homosexuality, but yeah, Australia had homosexuality for a long time, but they were not allowed to get married under the government rules. But from now on, they can because of the votes.
No, this is because the homosexuality has improved, that they have started fighting for rights and all kinds of things.
Yeah.
But this is only an opinion. That is all.
So does Buddhism...
You see, the problem is this thing called sexuality is because of the needs for what is called reproduction. Because now even plants reproduce. The reproduction has become necessary because what we call life is a struggle to keep on existing. This is the problem. And this struggle to keep on existing is not a conscious struggle. Now, the plants are not consciously struggling to exist. But the process of life is all the time trying to keep on existing. In spite of resistance from the environment. The environment is opposing the idea of existence. But what we call life is a struggle to keep on existing. That is what Charles Darwin saw also. He saw that life is a struggle to exist. But that struggle is not consciously done. It is unconsciously happening. So in the animals and the human beings, this struggle to exist is continued through reproduction. Because every individual has to die. And every individual is not able to keep on existing forever. Because every individual dies. So the only way the species or the generation is kept is through reproduction. So the father and mother get together to reproduce. Now the problem is that these human beings have started the thing called homosexuality. There is no homosexuality. This is made up by the human being. And the human being thinks that homosexuality is the right thing to do. Because there was a resistance in the mainly among the Westerners. There began a resistance to homosexual interests. That means that the males got together to have something like sexual things, but they couldn't. They were resisted by the people. So they began to fight for that resistance, and that is how this thing called homosexuality started. Otherwise there was no such thing. And when the homosexuality started, they began to start saying, we want to get married also. So there is no real meaning in that marriage other than fight against things, you see.
So, Bhante, from Buddhist perspective, it doesn't affect us, right?
No, this is not a problem for the Buddhists.
Yes. Yes.
You see, the problem is that if you are not allowed to have sexual relations, that means man and woman relationship, someone prohibits that. So, if someone prohibits that, and you are not allowed, say males are separated from the females, and the males are kept without the females, then when the desires come, they have to do something. Either it was what is called masturbation, or it has to be done by homosexual methods. That is what happened. So, because of this thing started, and they started fighting for it. And so, this has nothing to do with Buddhism. This is a natural thing that has happened because of resistance. When there is resistance, then people begin to fight. And that is how this problem came up. Now sometimes, you see, children are sent to schools where they separate the males and the females. So you have a boys' school and a girls' school. When you send the boys to school, when their sexuality comes up, you see, the boys want to have homosexual relationships, and the girls want to have homosexual relationships also. This is what is happening. And if someone begins to resist that, then they begin to fight. That is how these things happen. Okay. So, no other problems, huh?
Yeah.
You have another problem. Yeah?
Bhante, you have said resistance, struggle, or fighting.
Huh?
You have said resistance, struggle, fighting is the product of emotion, or emotion of our mind, or it's originate from emotion. Then, if say for example, like ours, we are Buddhists in Bangladesh, we are minority there, and if we are suppressed systematically by state mechanism, then what can we do? And according to Buddhist viewpoint, that what can we do? If it is from emotion, and if we do not respond, if we do not react emotionally, then what can we do?
I didn't understand that question. Did you understand? Huh?
I think Bhante here is referring to the situation in Bangladesh, where the Buddhists or the Chakmas, they are being suppressed by the majority, because the Buddhists and the Chakmas, they are minority. So the majority are suppressing them, trying to control them and all that. So what your question is?
Resistance and fighting or struggle is from emotion.
Yes.
Then how can we respond to this problem?
Yeah, so when they are being suppressed, how can they respond to this problem of suppression if they don't allow their emotions to bring them to resist and fight against the suppression?
Well, the only thing is fighting. This is what people do. You see, when they are suppressed, they begin to fight. This is the same thing about the homosexuality. They are fighting.
They have won, Bhante.
Huh?
They have won 70% to 30%.
Yeah.
I would like to answer your question as a Malaysian.
Yeah.
Before I do that, I want to ask you one question. In Bangladesh, is there a law that defines Chakma is a lower citizen, the Bengalis are higher citizen? So the higher citizen have more rights than the lower citizens. Is there such a law in Bangladesh? No. And you are making a lot of noise. In Malaysia, there is. The Bumiputras have rights, and the others don't have certain rights. But we don't fight. We just do our business, and there is peace. Our situation is far worse than yours. I think, Bhante, we go back to the teaching related to meditation retreat.
Yeah, yeah.
5 hindrances.
Yeah. Huh?
No more anything other than meditation. Let's talk about meditation, Bhante.
Yeah. Well, we can get on to the 5 hindrances. Huh? The 5 hindrances: Kama, Chanda, Vyapada, Thina Midda, Uddacha, Kukucha. Good. Thank you. And Vichikicha. So Kama Chanda is a desire for the pleasant sensation. That is the important thing. We have 3 kinds of sensations: pleasant, unpleasant, and the neutral sensation. And the pleasant sensation we like. So when we like the pleasant sensation, we want to get more and more of the pleasant sensation. This is why children like chocolates or ice cream or these things. Why? Because it is pleasant. In the same way, people like to see beautiful pictures because that is also pleasant. And people like music because it's a pleasant sound. And people like perfumes because it's a pleasant smell. And people like the pleasant taste. And then they also like the pleasant touch. It is in the pleasant touch that people think of sexuality. This sexuality really comes from the child touching the mother's body. It is the child touching the mother's body that developed the touch of the human body. So, past memories come into the mind when you touch the human body. And that has turned into sexuality. So that is the important thing to understand. Sexuality is mainly coming from the sense of touch and partly from the eyes and partly from the sense of touch. And the body is made in such a way that the desire for sexuality comes up. A very interesting thing that I saw, but it's even sometimes ugly to see, and sometimes maybe that when an elephant gets activated sexually, that sight is very funny looking. Have you ever seen that? Very rarely you have the opportunity to see, but I saw on a picture, you might be able to see in the computer. You have these ideas in the YouTube, how elephant begins to get sexuality, all the elephant's tools come out. You see? So these things happen just by looking at the female, you see. The male looking at the female gets worked up in that way. So these things happen because of the natural tendencies. It's a natural in the sense that the body is made up in that way. So it's a physical thing. The physical sight and the smell and things like that comes into this, and the activation comes up. But as I said earlier, that in the human being, out of all animals, the human being is able to stop that emotional urge by thinking, because the human being has the ability to think, and by thinking it is possible the thinking part of the mind comes and interferes with the emotional part. That's how it happens. And stops. So this is why the Buddha pointed out, Chetana ahang bhikkhave khammang vadami. Chetana really means the thinking part, the mano, comes and obstructs the chitta part. Chitta is the emotional part. So Chetana is the decision. It becomes a decision. Even if you are angry and you want to kill someone, but you decide not to do that. Or you become sexually excited about seeing some nice looking girl or something, and the man thinks, no, that is not right, and can stop. It's the human ability. The animals find it difficult to do that. So that Chetana is the real karma. What is called karma, it comes from this ability to stop this emotional urge. And so what we call meditation is learning to gain control over our emotions by thinking in the right way. So that is the meaning of mano pubbangama dhamma. The mano is able to change things. So it's very important to understand. So when we talk about overcoming the 5 hindrances, it is the mano that we begin to use to stop this. So whenever there is a desire for pleasure, we can change our thinking by thinking of another thing which is going against that. So we can think of the impermanence of pleasures, that pleasures are not things that you can obtain all the time. You see, it's like a child says, I want ice cream. Now, child is thinking of the ice cream and the taste in the ice cream and thinking, I want ice cream. So when the child keeps on thinking, the mother says to the child, well, ice cream is very tasty and good, but I am not having enough money to buy ice cream for you. You see? So if the child is told that, then the child has to stop thinking of ice cream. And then the mother may be giving something else, from maybe some sugar or something, and putting into the mouth. So like that, you see, and maybe the child wants to say, I want a bicycle. That other child in the other house has a bicycle. I also want a bicycle. So the mother says, I don't have money to buy bicycles. So you see, we don't need bicycles, you can sometimes, I will try to talk to the other child in the other house, and once in a way we can borrow that bicycle and ride a little and come back. And so like that, you see, we can change things. For human beings, that can be done. So this is why we do things like playing games. Playing games are also because there is what is called winning and losing. The winning and losing itself is something that helps you to overcome your desires. Instead of fighting, you play games. And you can win in the game, but you are not doing any harm to anyone. So it's a thing like that. The human beings have that ability to somehow change things. So this is why the kama chanda, or the desire for pleasure, can be got rid of by thinking of the disadvantages of going after pleasure. So you begin to reflect on anicca, dukkha and anatta. So it's by thinking of anicca, dukkha and anatta you can overcome the desire for pleasures. And also you can think, it is only, there is another important thing that we should understand. When we think, there are two ways of thinking. One is thinking in pictures. We call it visual thinking. Thinking in pictures. And the other is thinking in words. Verbal thinking. Thinking in words. So it is the visual thinking that gets the emotions excited. When we see things in the form of pictures, so we can also, if we are agitated by emotional desires for things, we can turn into a different picture. And that is what the Buddha talks about when he says, if you are interested in some sexual relationship with some person or something, you can turn to a different picture like a dead body, or even thinking of some other pictures where the emotion is not aroused in that way. So that is why we think of the parts of the body. Now it is only when we see something, a person, we can see a nice looking, say a young man looking at a girl, seeing the nice picture, but you can say, supposing you take that skin off, how will it look? So you see the inside of the body. When you begin to think of the inside of the body, that desire goes away. So that is how the Buddha is talking about how to overcome this desire for sensual pleasure by changing the picture. And by thinking of dead bodies, thinking of the anatomy inside the body, when you take the skin off, how it will look. So these things are very important to understand. And when we think of anger and hatred, we practice the metta meditation. May all beings be well and happy. So you are thinking not only about yourself, you are thinking of all beings, and all beings are suffering. You begin to think that there are so many people in the world who are suffering, either due to poverty or due to sickness, and in so many ways they suffer, and you have compassion for other people. And may all beings be well and happy. So the unhappiness is not only for yourself, but for all beings. And everyone is unhappy sometimes due to various reasons. And therefore, you think of others, not only just yourself. And you begin to have compassion for other people. And that way you are thinking of others, and by thinking of others as others' happiness is as important as your own happiness, just as a mother thinking of her only child. And so we begin to have compassion. And this way, ultimately, by thinking of all beings, we lose ourselves in the interest in all beings. And I said it turns into karuna, mudita and upekka. So that is the how to overcome. And Thina Midda is simply laziness and sleepiness, which is sometimes partly coming from parts of your body where you have been very busy, and the body wants to relax, or when you have eaten, all the blood rushes to the stomach and the head begins to feel sleepy. So these are some of the things that happen in the body itself, and so the sleepiness and laziness can come in different ways like that. But by changing your thinking to different pictures, you can come up again. Your body can also get changed in a certain way. So that is why you think also of you can think of death, you can meditate on death, and you can meditate on the Buddha and the Arahants, and all these things help. And also meditating on breathing. This way you can overcome worries and anxieties in various ways by thinking of different things. And another important thing is, when we learn to stop thinking about the past And if you are worrying about something that happened in the past, you can change your mind to some things in the present which are better, or maybe you think of the future, and sometimes if you are worrying about the future, you can take your attention away from those things by thinking of pleasant things. And so by changing the pictures in your mind, you can do a lot of changes. Now, even in this kind of meditation called the Pure Land meditation. So people think of a pure land and a kind of Buddha that lives in the pure land, and by thinking of that Buddha, people get inspiration. So these are also using pictures to purify your mind. So also to become aware of what is called vicikiccha, where the mind divides into two, the thinking mind pulling in one direction and the emotional mind pulling in another direction. There again, when you begin to understand how the mind works and how the Buddha and the Arahants and all these other meditating disciples of the Buddha, how they overcome their worries and problems. So we begin to learn gradually by changing our thinking. It's mainly by making use of visual images, we can change our thinking. It's very important to understand that how the mothers are able to stop a child crying. When the child begins to cry, the mother will try, look at this is a very beautiful thing here, look at this, or give a toy, and the child changes. You see, it's all visual thinking. By learning to change the picture in the mind, it is possible to change these things. So it's very important to learn these various methods. That's why the Buddha says, Buddhanussati mettacha asubhang maranasati. That means to think of the Buddha is Buddhanussati. Even the Pure Land meditation is mainly thinking about the Buddha. That thinking of the Buddha. And even thinking about the Arahants of the past, how they began to meditate. And even to think about that gives us inspiration. And Buddhanussati and Mettacha means practicing the Metta meditation. May all beings be well and happy. And Asubha meditation, that is meditating on the various parts of the body or meditating on corpses, dead bodies, and various things. Asubha meditation. And think of the death of the bodies and the death of everyone, that everyone has to one day die, and to think of death itself. And these are things that gradually help us to change our way of thinking and purify the mind in this way. But mainly, ultimately, we have to get into learning how to breathe properly and relax the body. That breathing properly and relaxing the body, we are able to get into a very relaxed state of the body and a calm state of the mind. And that is how we gradually enter what are called the jhanas. So we should try to attain the jhanas by learning to relax the body and calm the mind. So that is the way to enter the jhanas. Jhana is not met by trying to concentrate. Some people think meditation is concentration. That is the wrong idea of meditation. Meditation is relaxation and calmness. That is the important thing. It's only when you practice those exercises in the morning which helps you to understand the meaning of relaxation and calming the mind. So these are the important things to learn. So we have come to 4 o'clock. Is that the time for tea? So we are getting into the tea break. And so, yeah.